everyone! Welcome to Tangerine Planet, a place for kind thoughts, smart ideas, and a little sunshine for the world. Let's make a difference, one step at a time, together.
All right, let's dive in. Picture this. Mile after mile of towering turbines, anchored to the seabed, silently capturing the immense power of the wind far out at sea. This is the frontier of clean energy, isn't it? A cornerstone of our global race towards net zero climate targets. We're seeing this incredible, rapid expansion of offshore wind farms around the world.
Yeah, ambitious projects popping up everywhere.
Exactly. And there's this palpable sense of momentum, of progress, a seemingly clear path forward powered by clean, abundant wind.
That vision is absolutely central to decarbonizing our energy sectors, and it's happening at, well, a remarkable scale and speed, especially in places like the North Sea, which is really experiencing an offshore wind boom.
A boom, yeah.
Countries are pushing hard to build capacity quickly to meet ambitious targets. Take the UK, for example, aiming to essentially triple its current offshore wind capacity by 2030.
Triple it. Wow.
Yeah, to help cover its electricity needs with renewables. It's a genuinely exciting, transformative period in the energy sector, no doubt about it.
It really is. But, you know, with this unprecedented pace and scale of expansion, a fascinating and maybe somewhat surprising challenge is coming into much sharper focus. It's not a completely new problem. The sources say it's been known in principle for a long time. But the experts we looked at make it clear it's becoming a significantly bigger deal right now.
Right. It's scaling up with the industry.
And it involves this slightly counterintuitive concept, sometimes labeled perhaps a bit dramatically as wind theft.
Ah, yes, wind theft.
Yeah.
It's a phrase that definitely catches your attention, doesn't it?
It does.
And while, as one of our sources, the lawyer Eirik Finseros, points out, it's a bit misleading.
Misleading how?
Well, because, as he says, you can't steal something that can't be owned and nobody owns the wind, legally speaking.
Right, makes sense. Can't steal the breeze.
But the term vividly describes a very real physical interaction that's causing problems. It gets right to the heart of how one wind farm's operation can negatively impact another's access to that same wind resource.
And that core physical phenomenon is called the wake effect. So for this deep dive, we've taken a close look at sources that really unpack this emerging issue. Our mission today is to understand precisely what the wake effect is, why the scale and speed of development are making it such a pressing problem now, the significant consequences it's having, and, you know, the even bigger ones it could have.
Right, the downstream effects, literally and figuratively.
Exactly. And importantly, what researchers, regulators, and the industry are beginning to do about it. We want to get you quickly but thoroughly informed on this crucial, complex issue within the world of renewable energy.
Yeah, and it provides absolutely essential context for anyone trying to understand the practical challenges and, well, the complexities of the energy transition. It's not just plug and play.
Definitely not.
The source material offers some really valuable perspectives from key figures in the field. We hear from Peter Bass, a research scientist at WIFL. He's deeply involved in modeling atmospheric flow around wind farms.
Okay, the physics guy.
Sort of, yeah. And then there's Pablo Aro, a research fellow at the University of Manchester who's actually leading a significant new UK research project specifically on these wind farm wakes.
Oh, interesting. So boots on the ground research.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And Eirik Finseros, that Norwegian lawyer specializing in offshore wind, who brings the crucial legal and regulatory dimension to the discussion.
Got it. Science, research application, and law.
Exactly. Their combined insights paint a pretty clear picture of both the technical reality and the potential real-world implications.
Okay, let's unpack this. First up, let's really get our heads around the wake effect itself. What is this physical phenomenon? Peter Bass gives us a really clear starting point. He explains that wind farms produce energy, and the fundamental way they do this is by extracting that energy directly from the moving air.
Right, that's the core principle.
And quite logically, when you think about it, this process of taking energy out of the wind necessarily reduces the wind speed behind the turbines.
Exactly. Think about the air as having kinetic energy of motion. The turbines work by slowing down the air as it passes through their rotor swuck area, capturing that kinetic energy and converting it into electricity.
Okay.
So there has to be a reduction in wind speed behind the turbine. If there wasn't, well, no energy would have been extracted. It's basic physics.
Right, conservation of energy sort of thing.
Precisely. And Boz clarifies that this effect happens right behind each individual turbine, creating a pocket of slower, more turbulent air, its individual wake. But critically, and this is where the large-scale impact comes in, it also happens behind the wind farm as a whole.
Ah, so not just turbine by turbine, but the entire cluster.
Yes, the entire array acts like a giant porous filter, slowing the wind flow for a significant distance downwind.
Right. The term wake effect itself is a really helpful analogy, isn't it? Like the wake left behind a boat as it moves through water.
Exactly like that.
The boat displaces water, creates turbulence, and leaves this disturbed, slower moving area behind it. A wind farm does something analogous to the air.
Yeah, it takes energy out, slows the air down, and leaves this wake of reduced wind speed and increased turbulence trailing behind it. A good visual.
And what is genuinely surprising, and frankly makes this problem so significant, is the sheer physical scale and reach of these wakes, according to the research referenced in our source.
This part is quite striking.
It really is. While typically they extend for tens of kilometers downwind, which is already a considerable distance, let's be clear.
Yeah, that's not trivial.
The source emphasizes that for very large, dense offshore wind farms under certain weather conditions, this wake effect can stretch more than 100 kilometers, 62 miles.
More than 100 kilometers. Let that sink in. 62 miles.
It's astonishing. We're talking about a distance that could easily cross entire maritime boundaries between countries in places like the North Sea or the Baltic Sea.
Absolutely. It fundamentally changes how you have to think about planning these things.
It's hard to intuitively grasp how something happening at one point in the ocean could affect wind conditions over 60 miles away. What are these certain weather conditions that allow the wake to persist so far?
Well, the source mentions certain weather conditions, but doesn't dive super deep into the meteorology. However, drawing on general knowledge, which folks like Bus specialize in modeling, it's usually linked to atmospheric stability.
Stability, meaning?
Meaning, when the air is very stable, perhaps temperature increases with height or stays constant, which suppresses vertical mixing. The wake, which is this blob of slower, turbulent air, essentially gets trapped in a layer near the sea surface.
Ah, it can't disperse upwards easily?
Exactly. It can't easily mix with the faster-moving air above or around it, so it just persists, stretching out downwind for these incredible distances. In less stable conditions, turbulence mixes everything up much faster, and the wake dissipates quicker.
So stable conditions, maybe happening at night or in particular weather patterns, are the key.
That's typically when you see these very long wakes forming. And predicting those conditions, that's precisely what these advanced atmospheric models are designed for.
Okay, so it's not just a casual breeze disturbance. It's a significant, measurable reduction in wind speed that can persist over vast distances, especially under these stable atmospheric conditions.
Very much so.
And this persisting slower wind is what directly impacts any farm built downstream in that wake zone. Studies cited in the source quantify this impact.
Yes, and the numbers are quite concerning.
Suggesting a downwind farm's energy output can be reduced by as much as 10% or more if it's situated within the wake of an upwind farm.
That 10% figure is critical. And notice the or more. It really highlights the variability. Depending on the exact layout, the distance, the specific weather, it could potentially be worse.
But even 10%, that's far from insignificant, especially when you think about the economics involved in building these massive offshore wind farms.
Oh, absolutely not insignificant. These are multi-billion-dollar, sometimes multi-billion euro or pound infrastructure projects. A 10% hit on revenue is a huge deal.
Which brings us back, I suppose, to that attention-grabbing term wind theft. As Finseruss points out, you can't legally steal the wind because it's not owned. It's a shared dynamic resource.
Correct. No ownership.
But even if it's not a crime, the term highlights the core issue. One entity's legitimate activity extracting energy from the wind is having a quantifiable negative impact on another entity's ability to do the same thing.
It's a classic negative externality, essentially. An unintended consequence of operating in a shared space, using a shared resource.
And Finseruss emphasizes that while the term is legally inaccurate, the phenomenon is very real, and its consequences are certainly not just theoretical or academic.
No, not at all. He notes there are already a number of ongoing disputes between wind farm developers directly related to this issue. It's moved beyond principle into actual conflict.
Okay, disputes are already happening. That leads us perfectly into the second major question. Why is this problem becoming so much more significant now? We've established it's been known in principle. What's changed to make it such a pressing problem today?
Well, the overwhelming driver, according to all the experts we looked at, is the sheer scale and speed of the offshore wind expansion itself.
Just the massive build-out.
Exactly. We are globally in this urgent race to meet net zero targets. Offshore wind is seen as one of the most effective ways to rapidly deploy large amounts of clean power, so the build-out is happening at an unprecedented pace, faster than ever before.
So it's not just that the wake effect exists, it's that we are building so many wind farms so quickly and often so close together
Precisely.
that the individual wakes are starting to interact and interfere with each other on a massive scale that just wasn't as common before.
That's the crux of it. And the experts point to two specific interconnected factors driving this increase in wake impact: the increasing density of wind farms being deployed and the increasing size of the individual turbines.
Okay, let's start with density. The North Sea is highlighted as a prime example of this rapid, crowded development.
Absolutely. The North Sea is undergoing a dramatic offshore wind boom. It's ground zero for a lot of this. Simulations run by Peter Boss and his colleagues clearly show that the impact of wakes on overall offshore energy production in the region is projected to increase significantly in the coming decades.
Why?
Simply because the sea is becoming more crowded with wind farms. Pablo Aro reinforces this. He points out the ambitious build-out targets like the UK needing to triple capacity by 2030.
That means deploying how many turbines?
Thousands more turbines, according to Aro, very quickly.
Thousands more turbines in less than, what, 5 or 6 years? That pace is incredible.
It is. And as Aro states, these turbines are going to be operating very close to those that are already operating, so things are getting more and more crowded.
Okay.
So these wake effects are now starting to have more impact. The closer wind farms are situated, the more likely the wake from an upwind farm is to significantly impact the wind resource available to a downwind farm, reducing its output.
It's a direct consequence of needing to fit so much capacity into the suitable offshore areas, the good spots for wind.
Exactly. There's only so much prime real estate out there.
It's like trying to add many more lanes to a highway, but instead of just adding asphalt, each new lane creates this invisible friction zone that slows down traffic in the lanes behind it.
That's not a bad analogy.
The more lanes you add, the more complex and severe the slowdowns become, especially if they're too close.
A good way to visualize the crowding effect. And it's not just the number of farms or turbines, it's also the sheer size of the individual turbines themselves that's increasing dramatically.
Yes, you see pictures and they just look enormous. They dwarf ships nearby sometimes.
They are truly massive feats of engineering. Developers are constantly pushing the boundaries to build bigger turbines because larger rotors can capture more energy from the wind, more sweep, more power.
And the source gave that incredible visual.
Yeah, the latest generation of turbine blades can span more than 100 meters, 328 feet, roughly the length of a football pitch.
One blade.
Just one blade. It's hard to even picture.
Thinking about something the length of a football pitch rotating way out at sea is staggering. And these machines are incredibly powerful, right?
Immensely powerful. A single one of these giant offshore turbines can generate enough electricity to power around 18,000 to 20,000 average European households.
From one turbine.
Yes. That gives you a sense of the scale of energy extraction happening at each point. A lot of energy coming out of the wind right there.
So bigger turbines capture more energy, which is exactly what we want for the energy transition, faster decarbonization. But how does their increasing size potentially worsen the wake effect?
Well, Pablo Aro touches on this directly. He notes that the increase in turbine size could worsen the wake effect.
Why is that?
His reasoning is that a bigger rotor diameter may create a longer wake. Intuitively, a larger area extracting energy might create a larger zone of disturbed, slower air behind it.
Makes sense. Bigger disturbance, longer lasting effect.
Potentially, yes. Though he does add that more research should be done to understand the impact precisely. It's not fully quantified yet how much worse it makes it, but it's another factor adding complexity to the modeling and planning.
Okay, so let's recap that part. The wake effect has always existed, but the combination of needing to build so much capacity, thousands more turbines, so quickly by 2030 targets, often closer together, increased density like in the North Sea, and using larger turbines, potentially creating longer wakes.
Right, all those factors converging.
Means this known phenomenon is now interacting in ways that are far more significant and impactful than ever before, especially in the context of hitting those urgent net zero goals.
Exactly. It's a problem that scales with the ambition of the build-out. It's becoming a critical challenge precisely because we're succeeding in deploying offshore wind at scale.
Which is kind of ironic in a way.
It is. And that brings us neatly to Section 3, the tangible, real-world consequences and challenges that this growing problem is creating right now.
And the most immediate consequence is the impact on energy output, that number we keep coming back to.
That 10% or more figure.
Studies showing a potential reduction of as much as 10% or more for a downwind farm affected by a wake.
And that 10% or potentially more reduction in energy output is incredibly significant, especially when you look at it from a financial perspective.
Right, the money side.
Building offshore wind farms involves, as Eirik Finseros emphasizes, huge costs. Just enormous sums.
Billions, usually.
We're talking investments often running into the billions of pounds or euros per project. These costs cover everything from manufacturing and transporting these massive components to the incredibly complex engineering, the special ships needed for installation, ongoing maintenance, all in a harsh marine environment.
So developers are taking on enormous upfront costs and often significant debt to get these projects off the ground, or rather into the water.
Precisely. And to justify that massive investment and make a profit over the typical, say, 25 to 30-year lifespan of a wind farm, it is very important, Finseros states, for a developer to be able to reliably project that the wind farm will produce a given amount of electricity year after year.
That's their business model. Predictable output equals predictable revenue.
Exactly. Their revenue streams are almost entirely based on the amount of electricity they generate and sell. They need that predictability to secure financing in the first place, to forecast revenue, and to ensure the project actually pays back its initial investment and provides a return to investors.
Okay, and this is where the wake effect throws a wrench in the works.
A big one. Finseros makes it very clear. Even a relatively small, unexpected reduction in that projected energy output, like 10%, maybe even less, consistently over time can upset this investment calculation.
Upset it how badly?
Badly enough that it could potentially make the entire wind farm not financially viable.
Wow. So a project that looked perfectly sound on paper, where the costs and projected revenue balanced out nicely, could suddenly find itself losing money, or at least significantly underperforming financially.
Right.
Simply because a neighbor built a farm upwind and their wake is drifting over and impacting its wind resource.
That's exactly the risk. A huge risk that perhaps wasn't fully appreciated or planned for on this scale previously, especially in these increasingly crowded zones.
It fundamentally changes the risk profile for new projects, doesn't it? Especially if you're not the first one in a particular area.
It absolutely does. And as the source highlights, this isn't just a theoretical concern for future projects. These issues are already leading to tangible disputes right now.
Yes, you mentioned Finseros saying there are a number of ongoing disputes between wind farm developers. So it's not just economists modeling risks. Lawyers are definitely getting involved.
Oh, yes. Pablo Auro confirms this reality specifically within the UK context. He states there are a number of disputes between UK wind farms happening today, right now.
And what's fueling these disputes? Is it just the lost revenue?
That's a big part of it, of course. But Auro points to the underlying source of these disputes being partly due to the uncertainty over the precise impact of wakes.
Uncertainty seems to be the key word here. What exactly are developers uncertain about? Is it just how far the wakes reach?
It's kind of all of the above. It stems from the complexity of the physics and, frankly, the limitations of current planning tools and guidelines. Auro gives specific examples of this uncertainty.
What?
He suggests that current UK guidelines on how far apart wind farms should be spaced, rules designed to minimize these wake effects, may not reflect the actual extent the wakes can reach, particularly with these newer, much larger farms.
So the rules haven't kept pace with the tech.
Potentially not. So farms built supposedly outside the main impact zone based on older guidelines might still be getting hit by wakes more than expected.
Okay, so the rulebook might be outdated. What else?
The second, and perhaps even more complex, area of uncertainty he highlights relates to how wind farms are increasingly being built in clusters. Multiple farms in relatively close proximity, often developed by different companies in adjacent seabed lease areas.
Right, you see maps of planned areas, and they look like checkerboards sometimes.
Exactly. And while modeling the interaction between just two farms is already challenging, Auro asks the critical question. What if you have 6 wind farms? How do they interact with each other?
Yeah, that sounds exponentially harder.
It is. He states, that's what we don't know, but it's going to be happening for sure as more developers build out these adjacent areas. Predicting the cumulative effect of multiple overlapping and interacting wakes is extremely difficult with current tools.
I can only imagine. It's not just one wake hitting one farm. It's this whole complex, dynamic system of reduced wind speeds and swirling turbulence affecting a whole cluster of multi-billion-dollar projects.
Right.
And that uncertainty, that lack of a clear, agreed-upon way to predict or even measure the impact accurately after the fact, that's precisely what fuels disputes between developers. One feels their output is being unfairly reduced by their neighbors.
And the neighbors might disagree or argue it's within expected limits or that their farm isn't the main cause. It creates a situation ripe for conflict.
And the potential problems, as the sources point out, don't necessarily stop at national borders.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
This is where it gets potentially even messier. The cross-border angle.
Yeah, this feels like a whole new level of complexity.
Indeed. Eirik Finseros explicitly warns that unless this issue is proactively addressed, it could escalate into legal and political conflicts across international boundaries.
Conflicts between countries.
Potentially, yes. He provides a concrete example from his own work. A study analyzing how the wake from a planned wind farm in Norway could potentially negatively affect a downwind farm planned or operating in Denmark's waters.
Because the wake stretches over 100 kilometers.
Exactly. So a decision made by a developer or regulator in Norway could directly impact the economic viability, the energy output of a clean energy project in Denmark miles and miles away through this invisible atmospheric phenomenon.
Wow. That's a diplomatic headache waiting to happen.
It certainly has that potential. And Aro echoes this concern strongly. He raises the very real question, what if tomorrow there's a dispute between a UK wind farm and a Dutch, Belgian, or French wind farm?
Given the geography of the North Sea, that seems almost inevitable, doesn't it?
Aro doesn't pose this as a distant possibility. He stresses that it will be happening for sure, given the sheer density of planned and operational farms in shared maritime areas like the North Sea and increasingly the Baltic Sea as well.
This elevates the issue dramatically, doesn't it? From a technical and commercial problem for developers to a potential diplomatic and legal challenge for national governments. How do countries even begin to resolve a dispute over a shared resource, the wind that fundamentally doesn't respect sovereign borders?
It's tough. International law frameworks exist for things like shared fisheries or transboundary pollution, but applying them to managing atmospheric flow for energy extraction is relatively new territory, especially at this massive scale.
The technology and the scale of deployment seem to be outpacing the legal and regulatory frameworks needed to manage the consequences.
That seems to be a core part of the problem. And Finseros points to yet another significant, potentially negative consequence if countries and developers prioritize simply avoiding being in a wake zone without proper coordinated planning.
What's that?
What he terms the race to the water phenomenon.
Race to the water. Sounds like a gold rush.
It's a fascinating observation with a similar dynamic. If countries or developers become primarily concerned about securing the best yet available wind resources, essentially, the prime spots with consistently strong wind that are not likely to be impacted by existing or future upwind wakes.
They'll want to grab those spots first.
Exactly. It could incentivize them to rush the development process in those desirable locations to stake their claim before someone else does, or before someone builds upwind of them.
So instead of collaborating on the most optimal site planning for the entire region, considering cumulative impacts, they might just rush to plant their flag on the most valuable patches of ocean to avoid future wake problems for themselves.
Precisely. And Finseros warns that this race to the water phenomenon, driven by the desire to secure prime spots and avoid wakes, could lead states and developers to rush development in these areas.
And the risk of rushing is?
The significant risk he highlights is that rushing could lead to ignoring other important aspects of responsible wind farm development. Cutting corners, basically.
Like what sort of aspects?
He specifically points to the danger of overlooking or giving insufficient attention to protecting the marine environment.
Oh, wow. That would be incredibly counterproductive, wouldn't it? Building essential clean energy infrastructure at speed to fight climate change.
Right, a crucial goal.
But in doing so, potentially harming delicate marine ecosystems because the planning was rushed simply to beat a neighbor to an unaffected patch of wind.
It really underscores the complex trade-offs and potential unintended consequences of rapid, uncoordinated development, even when the overall goal is laudable. The wake effect isn't just about lost megawatts.
No, clearly not. The consequences are truly multifaceted. It hits developers' bottom lines hard, sparking commercial disputes. It raises the specter of international legal and political conflicts between countries sharing wind resources. And it could even inadvertently incentivize a rush to build that compromises environmental protection.
Well summarized, it's clear this isn't some minor technical glitch. It's a significant challenge that needs urgent attention across multiple domains: technical, financial, legal, environmental, and diplomatic.
Okay, so that paints a pretty concerning picture of the challenges. Let's move on to our final section, the path forward. What solutions are being explored or proposed to address this growing problem? Is there hope?
Well, first off, acknowledging the urgency in the context is key. Nobody's suggesting we slow down the overall push for renewables. As Finseros reminds us, European countries and many others globally have to decarbonize energy sectors, and we have to do so very quickly.
Right, the climate clock is ticking.
Exactly. The pace isn't going to slow down just because there's a technical challenge, and RO reiterates the scale involved. The UK alone needs to build thousands more turbines by 2030. The pressure is immense.
So the real challenge is finding solutions while maintaining this rapid, necessary pace of deployment. It's like trying to fix the plane while it's flying and maybe even accelerating.
That's a good way to put it. It's a race against both climate change and potentially against the negative effects of the build-out itself if we don't manage it properly.
So where do we start?
Well, a fundamental piece of addressing the problem is simply improving our ability to understand and predict it accurately. You can't manage what you can't measure, or at least model reliably.
Makes sense. Better science first.
And the UK government, recognizing this, explicitly highlights the need to better understand wake effects in a recent policy paper. They acknowledge it as an emerging issue causing uncertainty in planning.
And this is where Pablo Aro's new research project comes in, the one you mentioned earlier.
Yes, precisely. His project, which apparently launched in the spring of 2025, is directly aimed at tackling this uncertainty head-on.
What are they trying to achieve?
The goal is to provide a clearer picture of wake effects. They'll be developing more sophisticated models, analyzing real-world data, trying to understand exactly how wakes behave, how far they really reach under different conditions, and how they impact energy output, specifically projecting this impact for the scenario in 2030, when many thousand more turbines will be operating.
So, this research is basically designed to provide the crucial data and the better modeling capabilities that are currently lacking and, as we discussed, are contributing to these disputes and uncertainties.
That's absolutely the intention. And Aro's experience in simply announcing the project really underscores just how urgent the issue is.
Oh, what happened?
He mentioned being flooded with emails from people interested in it, from across the industry, from developers, from regulatory bodies, consultants, you name it.
Wow, so there's huge pent-up demand for this information.
Absolutely. He sees it as clear evidence that there's a very high level of awareness and concern about wake effects now, and a desperate need for better scientific understanding and predictive tools that everyone can trust.
The demand for this research is sky high because the financial and planning stakes are just so enormous for everyone involved.
Exactly. And Aro's statement really captures the critical nature of this work. He said something like, "We need to understand this. We need to progress more on the modeling so everyone is confident, because we need this amount of offshore wind to get to net zero. We have to deliver this."
That puts it starkly. He's saying that solving this technical challenge is not optional. It's actually essential for the success of the energy transition itself.
Pretty much. We can't achieve our net zero targets without successfully deploying this vast amount of offshore wind capacity. And we can't do that efficiently and without constant conflict if we don't get a much better handle on the wake effect.
Okay, so better modeling and scientific understanding are foundational. What about the regulatory and cooperative approaches, particularly for the cross-border potential we talked about?
Right. The science needs to feed into policy and practice. Eirik Finseros offers some clear recommendations here, drawing from his legal expertise.
What does he suggest?
Given the undeniable reality that wakes don't stop at maritime borders, he suggests that European countries, particularly around the North Sea, need to address this through much better cooperating and consulting with one another when planning wind farms in these shared maritime areas.
That makes intuitive sense, doesn't it? If my planned farm might cast a wake over your existing or planned farm in your waters 50 or 100 kilometers away, we should absolutely be talking about it early on during the planning stage, maybe even before permits are granted.
Exactly. He argues for proactive, collaborative planning, rather than waiting for disputes to erupt after billions have been invested. And he also recommends introducing clear regulations to help manage wind as a shared resource in these increasingly crowded offshore spaces.
Regulation. So moving beyond just voluntary consultation to actual rules.
Yes, establishing agreed-upon rules or frameworks for how wind resources are accessed in these potentially interfering situations, and maybe how potential wake impacts are assessed, managed, or perhaps even compensated for.
Clear rules of engagement for using the wind in shared international waters. That would certainly help reduce the uncertainty that fuels disputes and provide a framework for resolving issues before they escalate into major legal battles or political standoffs.
That's the idea. And he makes a compelling argument for how to think about this regulatory challenge by drawing parallels with existing frameworks.
Parallels to what?
He suggests treating wind similarly to other shared marine resources for which there is regulation, things governments already deal with.
Like fish.
Exactly. He specifically mentions examples like oil and gas deposits that straddle state boundaries. There are mechanisms for joint development or revenue sharing, or shared fish stocks, which are managed, sometimes contentiously, through international agreements and quotas. His point is that states haven't regulated similar issues before. This highlights that the problem of managing a resource that exists across borders isn't fundamentally new to international law and cooperation, even if the specific resource, the wind flowing through the air, is different.
That's a really useful perspective. It reframes it slightly. It's not like the international community has zero experience in managing resources that defy easy ownership or national boundaries. There are precedents, and perhaps those frameworks or the principles behind them could be adapted to the unique characteristics of wind.
Right. It might offer a starting point for developing those needed regulations. And interestingly, despite the speed of development and the clear potential for conflict, Finzeros actually ends on a relatively hopeful note regarding the potential for cooperation.
Oh, why hopeful?
He observes that European countries, where much of this rapid development is occurring right now, generally have good political relations. There's a history of cooperation on many fronts. Crucially, he argues, there's a strong underlying incentive to cooperate to find equitable solutions between states.
What's the incentive? Mutual benefit.
Pretty much, because ultimately, as he puts it, it's in nobody's interest to fight over the wind.
Right. Fighting over wind would inevitably slow down everyone's progress toward those crucial net zero goals. It could potentially harm energy security across the entire region if projects get delayed or canceled, and it would create a messy, uncertain investment environment that developers hate.
Precisely. So, collaboration, finding fair solutions, actually serves everyone's long-term strategic interests, even if there are short-term competitive pressures.
So even though, as he says, all of this is happening very quickly, Finzeros believes we shouldn't be prevented from finding good solutions just because things are happening quickly.
Yeah, the urgency of the climate targets doesn't negate the need for careful, cooperative planning. In fact, it arguably makes it even more essential to get it right quickly.
And it's important to remember this isn't solely a European issue, is it? The source points out the global relevance.
Absolutely. It briefly mentions that China, which is undertaking its own absolutely massive, rapid expansion of offshore wind capacity, is also seeing its own researchers highlighting the growing impact of wake effects on Chinese offshore wind farms.
So wherever you build lots of big turbines close together offshore, you're likely going to run into this issue.
It indicates it's an inherent physical challenge that arises whenever large-scale, dense offshore wind development occurs, irrespective of the specific geography or political context. It's fundamentally a global problem, requiring global awareness and potentially global solutions, or at the very least, regionally coordinated approaches tailored to specific sea basins.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. To recap this deep dive into the world of wind theft and the wake effect, it's a real physical phenomenon where wind farms extract energy from the wind,
Necessarily slowing it down behind them.
and creating a wake like behind a boat that can persist for significant distances, tens or even over 100 kilometers, especially under certain stable atmospheric conditions.
And it's becoming a major urgent problem, not because the physics changed, but because of the incredible scale and speed of the offshore wind expansion driven by net zero targets. This is leading to increased density of wind farms and the deployment of ever larger turbines, all of which compound the wake effect.
The consequences are serious and multifaceted. We're talking reduced energy output for downwind farms, potentially hitting 10% or more, which can make them financially unviable and really hit developers' bottom lines hard.
This, in turn, is triggering increasing disputes between wind farm operators, fueled by uncertainty over predicting and measuring these wake impacts accurately.
And it raises the specter of cross-border legal and political conflicts between countries sharing wind resources in places like the North Sea. Plus, there's that potential perverse incentive for a race to the water that could lead to rushed planning and potentially ignoring vital environmental protections.
But crucially, there is progress. Researchers like Pablo Oro are launching dedicated projects to improve our scientific understanding and modeling of these complex effects. We need better tools.
And experts like Eirik Finseros are proposing concrete regulatory and cooperative solutions suggesting international consultation, clear regulations, and drawing parallels with how other shared marine resources like fish or oil are managed.
And underpinning this is the recognition that, despite the pressures, there are strong incentives for countries to cooperate and find fair solutions, because ultimately, fighting over the wind benefits no one in the long run.
Understanding these complex, sometimes counterintuitive technical challenges and their really far-reaching implications seems absolutely crucial for ensuring the successful, efficient, and, importantly, equitable transition to the renewable energy future we all need.
Absolutely. It's not just about building the machines. It's about understanding how that vast new infrastructure interacts with the environment and, critically, with itself on a massive scale.
It's a powerful illustration, isn't it? How the energy transition isn't solely a technological or engineering challenge. It involves these intricate layers of physical science, economics, law, regulation, and international cooperation.
All of which need careful consideration and integration if we're going to achieve our ambitious climate goals effectively and sustainably without creating a whole new set of problems along the way.
And that leaves us with a final thought to consider as you go about your day. Maybe you see a wind turbine on the horizon or hear about a new offshore project in the news. As countries accelerate the build-out of the renewable infrastructure we desperately need to meet climate targets, how do we ensure that this necessary speed doesn't come at the cost of careful planning, robust cross-border regulation, and essential international cooperation, especially when we're dealing with vital, invisible, and fundamentally unownable resources like the wind itself?
Thanks for being with us today. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and tap the bell to keep the good vibes going. Let's join into healing our little world one step at a time, together. And all this is Tangerine Planet. Until next time.